This quick and simple technique is the difference between dry pork and restaurant quality results. Watch these locally sourced ingredients transform before your eyes. Today you can learn how to work magic on pork tenderloin and make a dish that'll rival any restaurant dish at a fraction of the cost. Welcome to the Dalstrong Test Kitchen. I'm Souza, and this is the Dalstrong Culinary Academy. Backed by popular demand, we've got Chef Gaetano Ferrara, culinary instructor at Centennial College. Last time he showed us how to make authentic carbonara without angering any Italian grandmothers. You can watch that here. But not yet. We'll pull that button back there at the end of this episode because you don't want to miss this. Instead of Italian, today we're going local.
Today on the menu, we have a beautiful pork tenderloin from Hamilton. We have some amazing Brussels sprouts from the Schomburg area, onions from Holland Landing. We have some sweet potatoes from the Lake Erie region. I really believe in local sustainable produce and food because whatever grows together goes together.
And in terms of quality, the end product, the finished product, do you think it matters as well?
Absolutely. I think that, the fresher the vegetables can be when they come out of the ground and get to your table, the better they're going to taste. There's a strong misconception in fine dining that imported means rare.
And it doesn't?
Absolutely not. We have amazing, rare, local things happening around us all the time. Morels, chanterelles, ramps, all these things are hyper seasonal and rare in the moment.
So rare doesn't mean, importing saffron from Iran. It just means that there's a very, very small window of time to grow this produce or harvest this animal, and we have it, and that's the window, and that's what makes it rare.
Absolutely. That's our cachet. That is our X factor. Hyper seasonal, local, rare. All right, so first we're going to start making our sweet potato puree. So I'll take my onion, just going to remove the root. So I'm basically just going to roughly dice this, okay? You just want to be efficient with every movement. That's for the most part how we do things, okay? And then from here, we're going to take that and we're going to go straight into our pan. And at this point here, I'll take a couple cloves of garlic and I'll just throw that right inside of the pot. Let this all kind of cook down together, okay? And we're just add a touch of olive oil or butter, whatever you prefer to cook with, a pinch of salt, and this is going to help a lot of the moisture release from the onion. Okay, this technique is called sweating. You're going to sweat the juices right out of the onion. Got it. Okay, and at that point there, I'll throw in some whole sprigs of thyme and rosemary. I like to leave them whole because I like to be able to remove them, okay, before we blend them, okay? So that is our process here for that. Always a little bit of pepper as well, just to get it in there. Building flavors over time is important. You don't want to just add everything at the last minute. In cooking, always remember the last thing you add is the first thing you taste. All right, so next up, I'm going to be peeling my sweet potatoes, and we're just going to give it a quick peel, okay? It's also important when you're dealing with root vegetables like this, if there's any little eyelets, you can just kind of remove them. So now I'll just take these and we'll cut them down to manageable size that'll cook consistently. The reason why I decided to cook this dish today is just because a dish isn't, a recipe isn't comprised and in a book, doesn't mean it can't taste great. Just really want to make sure that, you're using great ingredients and you're using the right techniques. At the end of the day, that's what's gonna make a fantastic dish. As you can see, guys, we have a beautiful sweat down onion at this point here. Everything is really nicely cooked. I'm just gonna remove my rosemary and thyme, and we're gonna add in our sweet potato. Now we're gonna add a little bit of chicken stock and we're gonna let that simmer away, okay?
Speaking of childhood memories, I remember hating Brussels sprouts when I was a kid. Why are you using them?
Well, with Brussels sprouts, it's a funny thing, my kids love them. And I think the reason why my kids love them is I don't overcook them and boil them and they're not brown and gray and gross. Our goal here today is to blanch these vegetables. And blanching is basically the process of partially cooking the product. And we do that by using boiling water and ice water, and we're going to use salted water. And as far as ice water goes for blanching, I also season this with salt. It's really important to do this last step because if I'm putting something in salted water and then I put it in something that doesn't have salt in it, it will leach its flavor out and not re-enhance itself. So that's why we put salt in our shock water as well.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm going to take some of these Brussels sprouts. I'm just going to split them in half. And I like to split them in half because the water can penetrate. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop these into my water, okay? And I'm gonna take a few of these for garnish. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm going to peel the leaves off. And this is a way for you to, really showcase your skills in the kitchen and impress some dinner guests. These leaves here are gonna blanch and cook way faster. So I'm gonna throw these right into the pot here, just like so. And I'm just gonna use a dipper. Basically pull them out in about 30 seconds and let them cool off. My Brussels sprouts are gonna take a little bit longer, and I'm gonna test for the doneness of the Brussels sprout.
I was just gonna ask you, how do you know?
Just by using a knife, and you're going to just try to pierce the core. If there's no resistance, you're there.
And that goes for any vegetable that you're blanching?
For the most part, especially green ones, even potatoes and things like that, you can use the same technique of just piercing it to just check the doneness that way.
Great hack.
And as well, one thing we're gonna do, and we should do with all our vegetables to keep them bright green, is once they come out of the ice water, we like to put them on paper towel and dry them off so they're not sitting in liquid, leaching out more water and basically degrading as they sit.
Fantastic. So seasoning and cooling.
The difference in a good restaurant and a great restaurant, a lot of times in good meals, can all come down to just basic seasoning. These are beautifully shocked. As you can see, the color, way brighter than when we started.
Right.
Okay.
Chef, I've definitely overcooked pork before, dry pork. Is there a secret to always getting it cooked properly, perfectly?
Absolutely. You can use a thermometer. That's always the best way to go. If not, you can use, little things like a cake tester. People, stick it inside of a cake to make sure it's done. But the way I like to do it is basically, a lot of it comes down to A, how it's trimmed, and B, how you cook it. So for me, I like to just really take a lot of the silver skin off and the exterior fat. And then from there, I like to sear it in a pan with a little bit of garlic, butter, rosemary, thyme, get it rolling in there, get beautiful caramelization, and then I like to finish it in the oven. I don't really overcook it. I let everything come back and rest after it's cooked, so you get those beautiful juices going back to where they came from.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the doneness in pork, and I think we want to talk about misconceptions here. I personally like my pork medium rare.
Right.
Is that a problem?
It's not a problem for me. Some people have issues with that because there's a stigma behind pork making you sick. We have the luxury in Canada, specifically in Ontario, that we have a really great hog program. They're raised properly, no antibiotics, hormone-free, all those great things, and that translates to way better pork.
Love to hear that.
So what we're gonna do now is we're going to clean this tenderloin, okay? So we can see here, there's this silvery gray color. It's like a piece of elastic. We wanna remove that. Basically, just gonna use a thin fillet knife. We're gonna come in here and we're just gonna remove. There's some exterior fat here that's not fantastic. We wanna remove that as well.
What would you say intimidates you the most about cooking pork?
I think you talked about it briefly earlier is the fact that it can get dry if overcooked, but there are safeguards in place you can do. Let's say I was worried about that. I could actually wrap this in bacon. I would be barding it this way here. All that extra fat would really render into the meat as I cook it. I can also brine this to keep the moisture in, but 9 times out of 10, it all comes down to making sure we don't overcook our pork. So next up, we're starting with the cooking of the pork preparation, okay? So very important, we have to be very liberal with our seasoning, okay? Don't be shy, salt and pepper. Take our pan here, bit of oil, and we're going to place our pork right inside.
Now, what is this doing to the pork when you're searing it like this?
At this stage here, we're doing something to the pork called searing it, okay? Basically, it's called the Maillard reaction. It's the carbohydrates in the actual meat itself caramelizing in the pan. So all sorts of protein have this. Even fish has it, even chicken has it. Carbohydrates, up to 5% of the actual tissue of the actual meat, that's what allows it to caramelize. It's the natural carbohydrates caramelizing. So that's important. We want to achieve that. We want to get there. We want to get all those beautiful colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to sear this to the point on both sides that it's got some good color. Then we're going to add some beautiful butter to this, and then we're going to baste it, okay? So you always want to have things like garlic in a pan. Even if this was a piece of steak, like a beef tenderloin or strip loin, we would always try to do that. So now that I have color on both sides, okay, I'm going to add some butter. So we're getting all that beautiful caramelization. We can see that meat getting beautiful color.
And that's the main reason you're basting it in butter, is for the color, or is it to also make sure that it maintains a bit of moisture? Or does it have anything to do with that?
Well, basically what's happening is that as this butter browns, it takes on a very beautiful nutty flavor. And we're trying to impart flavor into anything we cook at any opportunity we get. So that's why we do this at this stage here. Also, as I'm basting, I'm basically adding heat to the meat as I sear it, and it's really helping the internal temperature rise. This way here, it's inside the oven for less time.
Which is what you want, because once it's in the oven, that's when it...
Absolutely, it's just dry heat happening in the oven. So now I'm just gonna take this pan, I'm gonna put it in the oven, probably 6 minutes, 8 minutes, and it should be there.
Fantastic.
All right, so here we have our sweet potato puree. It hasn't been pureed yet, but it's basically ready. You can see it's already naturally gonna start to break down. That's kind of the telling sign that it's ready to be pureed. It's already naturally just kind of smushing on its own.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add in as we go, a little bit of butter, a little bit of olive oil, and that's gonna help kind of aerate it and kind of basically infuse the fat into the actual sweet potato puree.
So it's flavor and texture.
Flavor and texture, absolutely. Now, some people may decide to use cream or milk to cook their purees.
Right.
I like chicken stock. I just find it gives it more flavor. If you're vegetarian, you can use a vegetable stock, not a problem. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're just gonna start by trying to get this going. This length, sir. So that's pretty much the texture we're looking for.
Right.
Something that's rich and creamy, but not too thick and not too thin, somewhere in between. But this is now complete and ready to go.
So now that we're at the final stretch, this is where most home cooks cut corners. They nail the protein, but they forget the sauce. Let's talk about how sauce can make or break a dish, especially a composed dish, and how it can bring everything together on the plate.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about sauces and sauce making, especially with this type of application where we're roasting a piece of protein in a pan, a lot of people just take this pan, they're gonna put it in the sink. All of these little bits that are stuck to the bottom here, this is the goal. This is the most important thing. So we need to harness this. The way we're gonna do that is we're basically gonna put it back on the heat and we're gonna add a little bit of stock. And basically we're gonna let that all come off the bottom. You can use a wooden spoon and help pull all those great flavors off the bottom.
Is there a term for this, Chef?
This is called deglazing, okay? So we're deglazing the pan. Alternatively as well, guys, we have our beautiful rested pork. We're gonna add that nectar from that pork straight into there, okay? That's gonna help really elevate that sauce. Don't throw anything out until you're done making your dishes because you may need to alter your dish and elevate flavors. We're gonna add a little bit of maple syrup. A very important thing that we need when we're making sauces, acidity is key. If you have sweet and fat and salt and no acid, it can get very flabby on the tongue and not very delicious. So we're gonna add a splash
100%.
of apple cider vinegar.
Balance is what makes it taste tasty.
Just a touch, okay? Once it reduces by about half, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add our grainy mustard to this. And this is gonna give it a little bit of texture, a little bit of bite, a little bit of creaminess, and help kind of thicken the sauce as well. Once it's reduced to where we want, I'm gonna add some butter. We're at a monter au beurre, which means we're gonna incorporate and mount the fat from that butter into the sauce, and it's really gonna help the texture of it. I'm going to warm up my Brussels sprouts. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little bit of my stock again, add it straight to my pan. I'm gonna add a little bit of butter. Butter makes it better. I love butter. I think it's a great ingredient. It really helps dishes in terms of richness.
Sure.
I'll take a little bit of thyme.
So essentially you're just finishing cooking the Brussels sprouts.
Absolutely. So when you work in an organized manner, you're gonna have everything pretty much ready to go. And then it's all just gonna come back to your final process. Then we'll be plating, presentation, and serving your guests. My sauce is pretty much there. I've reduced it down to a really nice thick syrup. And now I'm just gonna add a little bit of butter and I'm gonna emulsify this in.
What was the French term you used earlier, Chef?
It's called monter au beurre, which means mount with butter.
Right.
So we're gonna basically just really get all that beautiful flavor in there as well. What I like to do as well is I like to take the roasted meat and I just like to kind of baste it in there just like that, okay? And that kind of coats and glazes the pork.
Now that we're finally here, the last step, the plating step. This is a very important step for me personally because I am one of the few people who thinks that it's the process that's more important than how the dish visually looks, the aesthetic of the dish.
Absolutely. I've had many dishes that look beautiful and taste not very great. All right, let's plate a beautiful dish.
Let's do it.
That is just a drag. That's basically what we call it. It's just a simple drag technique. So now we're gonna cut our pork just like that. With two little medallions. Just gonna place them kind of off center here.
Perfect.
Okay.
Everything from the Just the butter glistening off of the Brussels sprouts. It's beautiful. And there's obviously a dozen, 100 different ways to plate this dish, you know, but this is a fairly classic rustic style.
Very much so, very simple.
Yeah.
In terms of the cooking process.
Right.
But everything has to hit properly.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is our final dish here. Roast pork tenderloin, Ontario local, fantastic. And when in season, obviously quite rare.
Well, this is a beautiful restaurant quality dish, and I can't wait to sink my teeth into it.
Absolutely. Well, I do owe you $50, so.
But you said it cost 11.
Well, you know.
Okay.